me kick off the discussion with the LNG. LNG has emerged as one of the main infrastructure projects in many places in Africa, from Tanzania, Mozambique, to yesterday we were talking about Namibia and Congo, up to Nigeria and Cote d'Ivoire. So when we look at the map, you will see that huge investments are flowing into LNG. I would like Roger to share with us a bit how does he see the play, how it, how the gas can play a role into unlocking domestic, regional, and international supply. What scenarios are best for Africa, and what is required to build a roadmap for a balanced monetization strategy in Africa. Roger?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's quite a long question, but I'll do my best in the time. I think just, Seplat, by the way, we operate seven blocks. We've got 250 million barrels of gas, and we're a very big domestic gas player, so that's who we are. If I look at, let's start off with what's it all about. And I think the thing that needs to be talked about a lot more is employment here. Because, why are we looking to utilize the resources of Africa? We've got to give Africans that are rapidly growing in population jobs, right? And we can't give them jobs without affordable energy and reliable energy and energy they can pay for effectively. And none of the other industries are going to really evolve without it. So that's what we're talking about. I mean, we've talked a lot about emissions, and we talked about hydrocarbons, but the reality is Africa must use its resources to give employment to the people. If I look at gas itself, gas is a very obvious transition fuel. It's very, very important to be able to do it. And I look at just specific on the question about export versus domestic, and then also extension of domestic is some regional play. I think export is very critical because it's a foreign currency earner for the countries, and that's really important because to build all of the gas infrastructure you're going to need, and also the related power and transmission and everything else related in the value chain, you need hard currency, right? So you've got to have that export model, and the LNG play will then develop the upstream. So we must always remember that in the upstream, a lot of this gas is associated gas, right? So it's linked into the oil. You've got to access the oil first before you're allowed to blow down and access that gas. There are some non-associated gas plays, but a lot of it is integrated with the oil play. And you've got to have a real plan of accessing that. And actually having this material investment in LNG is critical. But of course, LNG by itself, and you can see this in Nigeria over the years, Nigerian LNG, big successful model, but actually the domestic gas play is a very weak model, and it's something that we're working hard to develop because you've got to have the domestic play. Domestic play is not technically more difficult, but it's certainly all the other parts you need to think through are more difficult. You've got currency, you've got regulatory issues around you to think through. You've got export of the oil to market and everything else you need to flow the gas. You've got price pressure through successive governments and everything else. And it's really important to get that mix right. And also the thing you've got to get right is the supply chain. You've got to get from, as the Americans call it, soup to nuts, but you've got to get from the upstream right down to the electron and where it's going to get utilised, and that's difficult. And I think only when you can get that working, then the regional power model, I think, it's probably more into the future. I think a lot of African countries need to solve its own electricity deficits before it then goes into a much more widely regional model. But I have a lot more to say on it, but I'll pause now, just in the interest of time. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Roger, for that, for sharing the perspective. I think the key point really, and which really need to be emphasized is exports should be balanced with the domestic market. And in order really to unlock the potential for domestic market, we need to have the right ingredients, understand the market, be able to address market risk, pricing risks, regulatory issues. But of course, many investors really are kind of a little reluctant because they don't have the insider information about the market. So this is something we really need to understand. I think the message here is very clear. Standard Bank and other regional banks are very keen to provide funding to natural gas projects, and this is a message to all of us. Whoever needs capital, can feel free to reach out to Delhi. Still discussing, funding. I want to come back to Roger very quickly. What do you see as alternative funding structures to support natural gas projects in Africa? Aside traditional, sources of funding from the north, what do you see as alternative sources of funding?
Yeah, I mean, Delhi, don't take us to heart when I tell how you fund it otherwise, but no, there aren't a whole lot, right, of funding. I mean, the problem with infrastructure, you need long-term money, and at the minute, if you're not going export credit, you're not going development fund money, traditional bank debt, you're probably paying even more margin on it, and anything above double-digit margins on long-term infrastructure, forget it. You're never going to make it work. So you need to do a blend. In something like, if you've got an export model on the gas, for instance, then you can actually do prepaid. I mean, you can do a parcel sale, right? So you can sell forward and actually raise money in the back of that. And that's, if you look at what's happening in the oil sector, a lot of the traders now are funding oil projects in country by forward selling the product, or the crude. And you can do that with gas as well. So that's one way of doing it. And that goes some way to getting the equity you need. And that's the big question is, where does the equity come from? And then what's the yield on the debt? And then trying to balance those things for long-term infrastructure. I do think that, I wish I could quiz you, Charles, but I do think the development money that is in the world needs to be re-looked at massively here. And what we really need to do is, call it Rich North development money, the more that you can cover and lend long-term cheaper, and actually bring much more local content into it. So for instance, if you've got equipment coming from wherever in the world, South Korea, sorry about that one, South Korea, that's a slip there, but South Korea coming in there, then, why can't you provide 100% funding and have 30%, 40% local content? Why not? So let's get much more inventive of how we use Rich North money in infrastructure back in Africa. It's very critical. I'll go back to my last point. Why would you do it? It's employment. It's jobs for Africans. It's the most critical thing we need to solve.
Thank you very much. Yes, we are coming at the end of this session. I would like to thank all the speakers for the insightful discussions, and please feel free to continue engaging with participants, especially on issues around funding, which I understand is now available, and also discussing what it takes to unlock natural gas for domestic market. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Thank you very much, Charles, and your panelists. Thank you very much for this conversation. Lots that you discussed. and how I liked how when you began, you talked about Nigeria presenting both challenges and opportunities. It's one of those things, right? It's a catch-22. Looking for credible partners with the same vision, same values, and then also the discussions around equity and you know, where funding really is going to come from and the yields on debt. So I think these conversations can continue in the networking sessions, and hopefully we will get to the answers. Thank you so much. Another round of applause.